luck. I even remember to turn the microphone on this time. Hooray! Hooray for me. Yes, here I am, England's own music sensation sweeping across America. That's me. No, it's not. It's the Beatles. And they're even older than I am. So, good evening, or good morning, or good afternoon, wherever you may happen to be in the world, since it's always difficult to tell. I have a small, select, perfectly formed, but very far-flung listenership and readership. So, you guys could be anywhere. And I like it that way. So anyway, hi, I'm Tad. I'm going to be reading. Those of you who were on the board last night or who were listening when I was reading early this morning, which is my 1 o'clock shift, may know that I was complaining about what a crap week I'd just gone through, which included losing power for a good long stretch, which is always fun because the only phone service we have is through our Wi-Fi. So when we lose power, not only do we not have light, heat, anything else, but we don't have internet, we don't have phones, we have nothing. So as soon as that was remedied, it wasn't just us, I hasten to say, although it's pretty common where we live because we live in the hills and we are surrounded by trees, which is one of the reasons we live where we live. But what happens is that when you're surrounded by trees like we are, and it rains during the winter time especially, sometimes trees fall over and just take your power wires out. I don't know what happened this time because the entire town that we live in was basically, or at least the entire part of it that I got to while I was trying to find somewhere I could get a signal, a regular cellular signal, was blacked out. You know, miles down the road, all the way to the local Quickie Mart, Quick Stop, 7-Eleven, whatever it is. Anyway, so that was the minor inconvenience of the week. The major inconvenience is that the next day the water went, and we live in a rural area, so we have a pump and we have a well, which is all well and good, so to speak, until something goes wrong, which it has. And 4 days into this crisis, I guess, 3 days, 4 days, I can't keep track anymore. We still don't have any water. So, you know, we can't do anything. We can't wash dishes. We can't, well, we went out and got a bunch of water. So, you know, bought bottled jugs of water so we could at least occasionally brush our teeth and flush a toilet. Because, you know, we're living high around here. We believe in really kind of going to the max with all those exciting civilized practices like flush toilets and brushing your teeth occasionally. Anyway, so that's, and of course, you know, it's not just that you have to try and get somebody out, which we have several days in a row. We've had people out trying to fix the well or the pump or figure out where it is or what the problem is, and it seems to be the electrical system, and it's incredibly complicated. And then, of course, the well is like 150 feet from the house. So I've spent much of the last several days in the rain running back and forth between the guy who's trying to fix the pump and the breaker box in the house to shut things off, shut them back, turn them back on, shut them off, turn them back on, you know, bring things, find a screwdriver that the guy doesn't happen to have with him, but I might have, you know, et cetera, et cetera. Back and forth in the pouring rain, soaking wet, miserable, and unable to take a hot shower unless I boil an awful lot of water. I could do that, I suppose. We could go totally 19th century, be very Regency. You know, we'll start boiling kettles of water and fill a bath. But I think I'm just going to stay disgusting until we get the water fixed. So anyway, so that's where we are. That's how life is at my house. We have no water. We do have our power back on, otherwise you wouldn't be seeing me. However, the good side, the good thing is, first of all, that I remembered to turn the microphone on tonight. Last night, I'm chattering away at the beginning of the reading, as I'm doing right now, and everybody is lining up going, no sound, no sound, no sound. And of course, because I'm in the position that I'm in, I wasn't looking at the comments because I had just started and I was going babble, 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 as I am prone. And then suddenly looked up and realized, oh, for goodness sake, I never turned the microphone on and everybody is telling me that they can't hear me. So tonight, that's the first good thing. Tonight I actually remembered to turn the microphone on, and I'm assuming since nobody is saying, we can't hear you, that either people have decided they're happy or not hearing me, or everything is working. So I'll go with that more optimistic reading until disabused of the notion. What else? Anything else? So anyway, and the other thing is that I finished the first draft of Navigator's Children. Now, as I've said several times, that doesn't mean I'm ready to send it out to the people who are going to be reading it next, like my publishers and Deb and people like that. And of course, the friends who I've mentioned many, many times on these readings, who have been so assiduously assisting me with the background and information in these books, because as I said, many people out there know the Ostenard series better than I do because they've read it more recently, and read it more times, since I just read it once and then didn't touch it until I went back to it in 2014, 2015. So I still have a polish to run through on the first draft, where I'm going to try and fix the most obvious and egregious things that I left either kind of crappy or, kind of made a note and said I'll fix that when I get back to it. And I've got a lot of stuff like that, but it's not going to change the overall length. I'm hoping I can chop it down a little bit because it's hideously long. One of the things I realized is that I was just ridiculously optimistic, more so than usual, thinking that this and Into the Narrow Dark could be a single volume, because I think between the two of them, they're somewhere around 2,100 pages in manuscript, which is roughly 500 pages more than To Green Angel Tower was, which in and of itself completely busted the limits of book production. We were barely able to make it into a hardcover with extra thin paper, and it just would never have worked as a paperback. So I'm glad I figured out that it wasn't going to be a single volume and split it into two, but it's still going to be a horrendously long final volume again. But that said, that's because there's just a ton of plot and a ton of characters and a ton of stuff that had to be resolved in it. And I think I'm most of the way there. I don't, nobody is going to say, they may say a lot of other things. They may say, Tad, you have no hair, and that's fair. I'll accept that. They may say, Tad, you talk too much, and I'll say, yeah, like you're the first person to point that out. What they will not say to me is, Tad, you totally short shrifted all the plot lines that you introduced, and you didn't resolve any of them, or didn't resolve a lot of them, or something. No, they're all going to be resolved, by God. That is my pledge to my readers. If I introduce you to characters and they have a plot line of their own, you will, by God, get some kind of catharsis with that plot line, even if it's just that they lived or they died. You will find out. Anyway, so that's where I'm at the moment. I can't think if there's anything else to say. The whole standing in the rain, hoping to get the well fixed, has kind of killed my brain. It's kind of killed my brain. It's a miracle that I can still string semi-literate sentences together, either on paper, or I can't do it on paper because I can't write at the moment. But it's a miracle that I can still sort of make sense. So enjoy it. You're seeing, excuse me, you're seeing a triumph of will. And I'm not talking about the Leni Riefenstahl Nazi kind. I'm talking about the sheer triumph of somebody who brain is fried and is still managing to make sense, deal with things as best as possible. And thank goodness for her sake, Deborah is over with my dad last night and tonight. So she doesn't have to put up with the lack of plumbing. I'm very happy for her, and I don't blame her at all because she had to deal with it the night before I left. So yeah, it has been 3 days plus. Anyway, so I think that's most of what I wanted to tell people. That's all in the way of exciting news, really. Finished the book, got no water, remembered to turn the microphone on. Bing, bing, bing. All good. So I am going to skip down the folks who've checked in and say hello to everybody. And then I will start reading. And because I think I left a couple of pages at the end of the last chapter unread because I was doing Yarnauga's voice. And Yarnauga's got a very deep kind of Germano-Norse, more Germano than Norse accent and scratchy voice. And I couldn't talk by the end of the thing. So anyway, let's see who's here. And first on the chat list is Medardo. And hello, Medardo. Good to see you. And we will be enjoying, if you will enjoy it, I hope, the weekly Ostenardian. I like that. Sounds like the Guardian. The Manchester Ostenardian. Ray, greetings. Good to see you. Claudia, hello. Good evening. Good evening. Penny, hello, Mr. Tad, says Penny. And hello, Penny, says Mr. Tad. Barban, hi. Good to see you. Cliff, hello. No, none of the electrical and water woes have been ameliorated, but I'm okay. You know, it's what I texted Deb today. I'll be all right. I'll survive. You know, it's just part of life. And especially it's part of life that you rather choose when you pick a house up in the hills because you like being surrounded by forest and you like being unable to see your neighbors without getting to that one point on the property where if you peek through the forest fringe, you can see one of your neighbor's houses sort of distantly. That's what we chose. So that's what we live with. When the power goes out, when we have well problems, when we have septic issues, you know, we signed up for it. So I can't really complain. No, I can complain, and I do. But I can't complain with a whole lot of self-righteousness. Anyway, but thank you, Cliff, for the kind thought. And I hope by the time we do this next week, I will be able to say happier things about the state of our water supply. Kelly, good evening. Kelly's checking in from Alberta. Good to hear from you, Kelly. Christy, thank you very much. I'm happy that you're happy, and that's a good thing. Angie, hello, hello. I skipped you last time. Okay, I did. I just said hello, hello, but I'll say it again. Hello, hello. There you go. That's 4 of them, so that I can skip you twice now. No, but I wouldn't do that intentionally. Anyway, good to see you. Who else have we got here? Jim, hello, hello. Yep, I had a great week, except for all the stuff that I just complained about. And the Eagles won again this week. I'm still really embarrassed that I thought people were talking about actual Eagles. But that's all right. That's okay. As long as until the Eagles play the 49ers, because I am enough of a sports guy that I have my local teams and I'm a supporter. And, you know, I mean, I grew up as a sports guy, as the only sports guy really in my family, which was very strange. You know, nobody else was particularly into them. You know, baseball, football, basketball, any of that stuff. So I just kind of developed it on my own. But anyway, so I'm perfectly willing to say right on Philadelphia Eagles, unless we get to the playoffs and the 49ers and the Eagles are playing, in which case all bets are off and it's going to be cruel and ugly. No matter what happens, somebody is going to go home unhappy. Emily, hello, and happy December to you too. Isaac, good to see you. Nice to have you back. Isaac was also with us last night. Chris, hello, buddy. 4 a.m. Ah, okay. I know, 250 of these things. Most of them utter gibberish. It's amazing. Yeah, I've been doing this a lot. It adds up, doesn't it, after a while, doing twice a week for a few years. God, it's too bad I didn't think of some way to monetize this. Nah, there was no way to monetize it. That was never the point anyway. So, but every now and then when I go 250 videos that Chris has put up for me on my behalf on YouTube, you know, and they're just sitting there. But I'm very grateful. And that way, anybody who does want to hear the things and misses a week or whatever has somewhere to go get them. And that's super cool. So, Tracy, hello. Tracy's going to go out and try glamping without power and water. I'm not sure that glamping, which means glamour camping, I'm not sure glamping is really the proper word if you have no power and no water. Generally, human beings need water to live. You can do without electricity, but I think you'll need water. So if they're telling you you're glamping, tell them glamping is considered to include some kind of source of water. Okay, and I went camping a lot when I was a kid, so I know whereof I speak. Anyway, I hope you have a great time. Kristen, hello. Kristen had to get her car jump started because of that stupid map light I left on for 2 days. Yeah, that kind of stuff will bite you in the bottom. It's true. It's one of those things I'm always worrying about because people in my family, they go and unload the car and they never remember things like closing the hatch door or whatever. And I'm going, there's a light on that thing and it's just sitting there burning. You got to close up. Anyway, sorry you had to get jump started. Hope that was the only problem. Angie says you need a well on your land. No, we have a well. We have a well. Isaac says your well could have silted in or the water table has lowered. Yeah, unfortunately, it's not anything like that. Well, or fortunately, it's not anything like that. It's definitely there's water in it. Plus, the reason that we knew there was something wrong with the electrical system is because we then went out a couple of days ago and had many hundred gallons of water delivered to our reserve tank. Because that's how the wells work. They pump and pump and pump until your reserve tank is filled, and then they shut off. So we have water. We know there's water in the reserve tank, but it's like just there. We can't get to it. They managed to get it turned on for about 10 minutes this afternoon. And I was so excited. I was so thrilled. I was like, really, I'm not exaggerating here. I was literally in the process of writing a glowing letter to the company who had been out working for the last 3 days, and particularly the guy who had seemingly just solved the problem. Literally, that's what I was doing. And as I was doing that, I got up, went into the kitchen upstairs, and turned the faucet on, and it was gone. It had gone off again 10 minutes after it had gone on for the first time in several days. And I was so bitter. I mean, I'm not blaming these guys. It's clearly not something. And I went outside and could smell that the motor on the pump was overheating, and turned it off, and, stuff like. So it wasn't their fault. There's something in the system somewhere that's messed up. But I was so happy for just a moment. The cares of the world just lifted off me. And I was like, I could hear the choir, the angelic choir, and the sun was rising into the sky, and all was good. And then 10 minutes later, the flipping water doesn't work again. Anyway, so it's not silted in, and it's not the water table. It's the delivery system, and it's absolutely messed up. And I don't know why. And we're going to have to figure that out. Susan Shamblin, good evening. Good to see you. Becky. Becky says she thinks she'd get a hotel room, at least for a shower. Well, yeah, it may come to that. Fortunately, one of the good things about doing an online reading is you guys can't tell. As long as I kind of wipe my face, you guys can't tell whether I've had a shower or not. And I probably shouldn't mention that to you, because now you're going to be thinking, wonder how smelly he is. Anyway, let me see who else you got. Jeremy says, hi, Tad, not as rainy today. Yes, it's not. I still had to stand in mud up to my knees, but it was not as rainy today. Thank you. So that was reassuring. I appreciate it, people trying to make me feel better. I really do. It's very kind. Cliff this is a comment for earlier, where Cliff, who is obviously one of the people listening last night, if I didn't know it already, says, we can hear you. Tiffany, good evening. A Brit from Florida. Means you must have been a Brit first before you moved to Florida, I'm guessing, because if you're born in Florida, unless you move there to Britain when you're very, very young, you're technically still a Floridian. We'll have to figure this out, Tiffany. You'll have to explain this to me. But anyway, my wife is a Brit from California now, so I certainly get it. I get it. Medardo kindly sends congratulations, or felicitaciones, as we say in Spanish, for the completion of the Navigator. So thank you. Tiffany says the same thing. Very kind. Rose, hello, Rose Wilderness. I love your name. God, why didn't I get a name like that? I could have been great if I was Rose Wilderness, or even if I was Buck Wilderness. Instead, I was Tad Williams, which, it is my name, so I'm not complaining. It could be worse. It could be something really dreadful, but I never really felt it had that kind of gravitas that I wanted. Anyway, I'm taking a long time to do this, so I better keep going. So hello, Rose. Hello, Angie, who I already said hello to, but I'll say hello to again because I owed her from last night. Ron, hello, buddy. Good to see you. I was just talking on you a minute ago. Carlos Roberto Arevalo. Just finished watching the last stream, and I find you're streaming. Yes, it's every Sunday at 1 a.m. and 7 p.m. my time, California time. So, but as you may have noticed, as you probably have noticed since you just finished watching the last stream, everything is also online, either on my social media or on the YouTube channel that Chris Fab set up. So there you go. Ron, thank you. Joy, hello, good to see you. Timothy, hello, good to see you too. Jim says that for the record, that's how I feel about the 49ers. Yeah, I know. Isn't it interesting? We sports fans have distinct things. It's like most of us have a favorite team. We have other teams we kind of, we're okay with. And if our team can't win, then we'd be okay with those teams winning. And then everybody hates the Dallas Cowboys, except for people who root for the Dallas Cowboys. That's just how it works. Same thing used to be true with the New York Yankees, with Manchester United. Now it's true to an extent, at least in California, with the Dodgers. Everybody has a team that they loathe if they are a sports person. And it's entertaining. It's entertaining. Some of my best conversations have been with other fans who hate the same teams that I do. More so than talking about even loving the same team. But, as soon as you start going like, oh yeah, and I totally hate the Yankees or something like that, and they're like, yeah, me too. And then you can have these great conversations. Or I hate the Dodgers. Yeah, remember Tommy Lasorda? Oh my God, I hated that guy. And Steve Garvey. Anyway, sorry, sports trivia. Who have I not said hello to yet? Billy, checking in from Canada. Hello. Suzanne, suffering from insomnia in Yorkshire. Oh, Suzanne, I'm very sorry if you're still with me. I know how that can be. That is no fun. Jonathan, hello. Thank you. Angie. All right, Angie's talking about her well, which people can read. Tiffany, an original Brit now living in Florida. Yeah, that's like Deb, an original Brit now living in California. V, hello. Checking in. V is checking in as usual from Dearborn. Good to see you. Ray evinces his Seahawks fandom. Yeah, some of my good friends are Seahawks fans, and I like the Seahawks. If the Seahawks were not in the 49ers division, I would totally root for them. But since they are, I'm afraid we must be bitter enemies. And I had to tell all my friends who are Seahawks fans that, sadly, we must be bitter enemies. Luis, hello, checking in from Monterrey, Mexico. Thank you, sir. Bienvenidos. Or bienvenido. Timothy Roberts is talking about Steve Garvey's big forearms. Yeah, he had Popeye forearms, but that's getting into weird sports trivia. Susan, hello. I'm not sure. I don't think I said hello to you today. I think I said hello to you last night, but I'm not sure. Let me see. Is there anybody I haven't said hello to yet? No, I think I got everybody. Okay. Excellent. Anyway, so what I am going to now do is start reading, since I put this off for quite a long time. Those of you who remember, or who did listen last night, may remember that we were in the midst of, first it had been about Simon and the others hearing from Yarnauga something about the history of Inaluki and how he died defending his people from the mortals. And we hadn't quite gotten back to the Storm King part yet. In other words, how he became an undead force of unpleasantness. I don't want to say evil, because one of the things about Inaluki is that he started out as a person who is legitimately trying to save his people. But as often happens, violence and rage took over, and he lost perspective and became something horrible himself. Anyway, so then we read a short section where Pryrates had gone down to tell Inch, who is now the master of the Castle Forges at the Hayholt, that he needed to finish some engines without specification. So anyway, we've got one last page and a half left of that section. So I'm going to read, and then we will continue with the next chapter. The priest had reached one of the broad stairheads, with hallways leading left and right, and the next flight of steps ahead, when a dark figure abruptly slid from the shadows. Pryrates? The priest, whose nerves were such that he might not have cried out if struck with an axe, nevertheless felt his heart quicken. Your Majesty? He said evenly. Elias, in unintended mockery of the foundrymen below, wore his black cloak hood pulled close around his face. He went that way always these days, at least when he left his chambers, just as he always wore the scabbarded sword. The gaining of that blade had brought the king power such as few mortals had ever had, but it had not come without a price. The Red Priest was wise enough to know that the reckoning of such bargains was a very subtle science. I I cannot sleep, Pryrates. Understandable, my king. There are many burdens on your shoulders. You help me with many. Have you been seeing to the siege engines? Pryrates nodded and realized the hooded Elias might not see it in the dark stairwell. Yes, sire. I would like to roast Inch, that pig of an overseer, over one of his own fires. But we will have them, sire, somehow. The king was silent for a long while, stroking the hilt of the sword. Aglamond must be crushed, Elias said at last. Joshua defies me. He is no longer your brother, sire. He is only your enemy, Pryrates said. No, Elias said slowly, thinking deeply. He is my brother. That is why he cannot be allowed to defy me. That seems obvious to me. Is it not obvious, Pryrates? Of course, your majesty. The king pulled his cloak tighter around him, as though to keep out a cold wind, but the air that billowed up from below was thick with the heat of the forges. Have you found my daughter yet, Pryrates? Elias asked suddenly, looking up. The priest could faintly see the eye gleam and shadow of the king's face in the cavern of his hood. As I told you, sire, if she is not gone to Naban, to her mother's family there, and our spies do not think so, then she is at Naglamond with Joshua. Miriamel. The exhaled name drifted down the stone stairwell. I must have her back. I must. The king extended an open hand, slowly closing it into a fist before him. She is the one piece of good flesh I shall save from the broken shell of my brother's house. The rest I shall tread into dust. You have the strength now, my king, Pryrates said, and you have powerful friends. Yes. The High King nodded slowly. Yes, that is true. And what of the huntsman, Ingen Jaeger? He has not found my daughter, but neither has he returned. Where is he? He still hunts the wizard's boy, Majesty. It has become something of a grudge. Pryrates waved his hand as though trying to banish the uncomfortable memory of the Black Rimmersman. A good deal of effort, it seems to me, has been spent trying to find this boy who you say knows a few of our secrets. The king frowned and spoke harshly. I wish as much trouble had been expended on my own flesh and blood. I am not pleased. For a moment his shadowed eyes glinted angrily. He turned to go, then stopped again. Pryrates? The king's voice had changed again. Yes, sire. Do you think I shall sleep better when Naglamond is thrown down and I have my daughter back? I am sure, my king. Good. I shall enjoy it even more, knowing that. Elias slipped away up the shadowed corridor. Pryrates did not move, but listened as the king's retreating footsteps blended with the hammers of Erkenland, whose clangor sounded monotonously in the deeps below. Chapter 34. Forgotten Swords. Vorsheva was angry. The brush trembled in her hand, and the red line trailed onto her chin. See what I have done, she said, irritation thickening her heavy Thrithing's accent. You are cruel to rush me. She blotted her mouth with a kerchief and began again. By the Adon, woman, there are more important matters afoot than your lip-painting. Joshua stood up and resumed his pacing. Do not speak so to me, sir, and do not walk like that behind me. She waved her hand, searching for words. To and fro, to and fro. If you must throw me out into the corridor like a camp follower. At least I will first make myself ready." The prince picked up a fire iron, then stooped to poke at the coals. "You are not being thrown into the corridor, my lady." "If I am your lady," Vorsheva scowled, "then why may I not stay? You are ashamed of me." "Because we will speak of things that are not your concern. If you have not noticed, we are preparing for war. I'm sorry if that inconveniences you." He grunted and stood, laying the poker carefully back against the hearth. "Go speak with the other ladies. Be glad you do not have to carry my burdens." Vorsheva spun to face him. "The other ladies hate me," she said, eyes narrowed, a lock of black hair dangling loose across her cheek. "I hear them whispering about Prince Joshua's slut from the grasslands, and I hate them, the northern cows. In my father's marchland they would be whipped for such, she struggled with a still unfamiliar tongue, such disrespect." She took a breath to still her trembling. "Why are you so cold to me, sir?" she asked at last. "And why did you bring me here to this cold country?" The prince looked up, and for a moment his stern face softened. "I sometimes wonder." He slowly shook his head. "Please, if you despise the company of the other court ladies, then go and have the harper sing for you. Please, I will not have an argument tonight." "Nor any night," Vorsheva snapped. "You do not seem to want me at all. But old things, yes, those you are interested in. You and your old books." Joshua's patience was wearing thin. "The events we will speak of tonight are old, yes, but their importance is to our current struggle. Damnation, woman, I am a prince of the realm and cannot evade my responsibilities." "You do better at that than you think, Prince Joshua," she replied frostily, throwing her cape about her shoulders. When she reached the doorway, she turned. "I hate the way you think only of the past. Old books, old battles, old history." Her lip curled. "Old loves." The door swung closed behind her. "Thanks to you, Prince, for admitting us to your chambers," Benedict said. His round face was troubled. "I would not have been making such a request had I not thought this important." "Of course, Benedict," the prince said. "I, too, prefer to talk in more quiet surroundings." The troll and old Yarnauga had pulled up the hard wooden stools to sit beside Joshua at his table. Father Strangyard, who had accompanied them, was walking quietly around the room, looking at the tapestries. In all his years at Naglemund, it was the first time he had been in the prince's private chambers. "I am still reeling from the things I heard last night," Joshua said, then gestured at the sheets of parchment Benedict had strewn before him. "Now, you say there is even more I must know?" The prince gave a small, rueful smile. "God must be chastising me, taking my nightmare of having to command a castle at siege and then complicating it with all this." Yarnauga leaned forward. "As long as you remember, Prince Joshua, that it is no nightmare we speak of, but a dark reality. We cannot any of us afford the luxury of thinking this is a fantasy. Father Strangyard and I have been at days of searching in the castle archives," Benedict said. "Since first I came, trying to find the meaning of the Weird of the Swords." "The dream, you mean, that you told me of?" Joshua asked, idly thumbing through the pages of writing on the table. "The one that you and the boy had in the witch woman's house." "And not them alone," Yarnauga declared, his eyes sharp as chips of blue ice. "The night before I left Tungoldir, I too dreamt of a great book. To Svardenwyrd was written upon it in letters of fire." "I have heard of the priest Nissi's book, of course. the prince said, nodding. When I was a young student with the Usirian brothers, it was infamous, but it no longer exists. Surely you are not going to tell me you have found a copy here in our castle library. Not for the lack of our searching, Benedict replied. If it had been anywhere but perhaps the Sansallan Adonitis, here it would be. Strangyard has been assembling a library of great wonder. Very kind, the archivist said, facing the wall as though studying a tapestry, so that his unseemly blush of pleasure would not imperil his reputation as a level-headed historian. In fact, for all of Strangyard's and my hunting, it was Yarnauga who has been partway solving our problem, Benedict continued. The old man leaned forward and tapped a skinny finger on the parchment. It was a stroke of good fortune, which I hope bodes well for us all. Morgenes had sent once to ask me questions about Nisses, who was, of course, a Rimmersman like myself, to help fill in some empty spots in his written life of your father, King John. I was of little help, I'm afraid. I told him what I knew, but I remembered his asking. And, Benedict said, excited, another stroke of luckiness. The one thing young Simon saved from the destruction of Morgenes' chambers was this book. He grabbed a sheaf in his stubby brown hand and waved it. The Life and Reign of King John Presbyter by Morgenes Ercestres, Dr. Morgenes of Erchester. In another way still, the doctor is with us here. We owe him more than we can say, Yarnauga pronounced solemnly. He saw the dark days coming and made many preparations, some we still do not know of. But the most important to this current moment, the troll burst in, is this, his life of Prester John. Look. He thrust the papers into Josua's hand. The prince leafed through them, then looked up, smiling faintly. Reading Nissy's tangled and archaic language puts me in mind of my student days, prowling the archives of the Sansallan Adonitis. He shook his head regretfully. This is fascinating, of course, and I pray that I have the time someday to read Morgenes' full work. But I still do not understand. He held up the page he had been reading. Here is a description of the forging of the Blade Sorrow, but I see no information that Yarnauga has not already given to us. What help will this be? Benedict, with Josua's permission, took back the manuscript. We must be looking closer, Prince Josua, he said. Morgenes quotes from Nisses, and the fact that he actually read at least some of Dusvardenweird only confirms for me Morgenes' resourcefulness. He quotes Nisses as speaking of two other great swords, two more besides Sorrow. Here, let me read what Morgenes tells on Nisses' own words. Benedict cleared his throat and began. The first great sword came, in its form original, from out of the sky, 1,000 years agone. Usiris Adon, whom we of Mother Church call the son and avatar of God, had hung for 9 days and nights, nailed by his hands and feet to the execution tree in the square before the temple of Euvenis in Naban. This Euvenis was the heathen god of justice, and the Nabani imperator was wont to hang such diverse criminals as his courts convicted from the mighty branches of Euvenis' tree. So hung Usiris of the lake, guilty of sacrilege and rebellion for proclaiming the single god, heels above head like a carcass of beef. There came that 9th night a great roaring and a streak of fire, and a hurtling bolt from the heavens flew down from the sky and smote the temple into 1,000 shards. killing all the heathen judges and priests within. When the reek and fumes were dispersed, the body of Osiris Adon was gone, and a great shout went up that God had restored him to heaven and punished his enemies, although others said that Osiris' patient disciples had cut down his body and escaped in the confusion. These naysayers were quickly made silent, and the word of the miracle spread throughout all the quarters of the city. Thus began the downfall of the pagan gods of Naban. In the smoking rubble of the temple there now lay a great and steaming stone. It was proclaimed by the Adonites that here was the heathen altar, melted by the vengeful fires of the one God. I, Nisses, believe instead that this was a flaming star of the heavens, fallen to earth, as happens on occasion. Now from this molten rack was taken a great piece, and the imperator's sword wrights found it workable, and the sky metal was hammered into a great blade. In mind of the scourging branches which had flayed Osiris' back, the star sword, as I suppose it to be, was named Thorn, and a mighty power there was in it. Thus, Binabik said, the sword Thorn being passed down through the line of Nabanite rulers, came at last to Sir Camarus, my father's most beloved friend, Joshua finished. The stories of Camarus' sword Thorn are many, but I had not known before today where it came from, if Nisses is to be believed. This passage has somewhat the smack of heresy. Those of his assertions which can be measured against truth measure well, your Highness, Yarnauga said, stroking his beard. Still, said Joshua, what does it mean? Camarus' sword was lost when he drowned. Allow me to share more of Nisses' writing, Binabik replied, here where he is speaking of the third part of our puzzle. The second of the great swords came from the sea, traveling across the salt ocean from the west to Ostenard. For some years the sea raiders had come seasonally to this land from the far cold country they called Isgard, only to return across the waves when their pillaging was done. Then it was some tragedy or dire happening in their native place caused the men of Isgard to abandon that land and bring their families in boats to Ostenard, to settle in Rimmersgard in the north, the land of my own far more recent birth. When they had landed, their king Elvret gave thanks to Udon and their other heathenish gods, and commanded that the iron keel of his dragon boat should be made into a sword to protect his people in their new land. Thus it went that the keel was given to the Dvernings, a secretive and crafty race, and they separated out the pure and significant metal by means unknown, and smithied a long and shining blade. But in the haggling over the payment, King Elvret and the master of the Dvernings fell out, and the king did slay the smith and took the sword unpaid for, which was the cause of much later woe. In thought of their coming to this new country, Elvret named the sword Mineyar, which means year of memory. The troll finished and walked to the table to drink from the water ewer there. So, Binabik of Ykanuk, 2 powerful swords, Joshua said. Perhaps this dreadful year has softened my mind, but I cannot think what significance they have to us. 3 swords, Yarnauga offered, counting Ineluki's Chingizu, what we call sorrow. 3 great swords.
You must read the last part of Nissy's book that Morgana cited, Prince Joshua,
Strangyard said, joining them at last. He picked up the parchments that Benebek had laid on the table.
Here, please, this bit of rhyme from the end of the madman's writings.
When frost doth grow on Clavy's bell, Joshua read aloud, and shadows walk upon the road, when water blackens in the well, 3 swords must come again. When Buchan from the earth do creep, and Hunan from the heights descend, when nightmare throttles peaceful sleep, 3 swords must come again. To turn the stride of treading fate, to clear the fogging mists of time, if early shall resist too late, 3 swords must come again. I think I understand, the prince said with mounting interest. This almost appears to be a prophecy of our own day, as if Nissi somehow knew that Inaluki would someday return.
Yes, Arnauga said, combing his beard with his fingers as he looked over Joshua's shoulder. And apparently, if things are to be made right, 3 swords must come again. Our understanding, Prince, Benebek said, is that if somehow the Storm King can be defeated, it is by our finding the 3 swords.
The 3 swords of which Nissi speaks? Joshua asked.
So it would seem.
But if what the boy Simon saw is correct, sorrow is already in the hands of my brother. The prince frowned, his pale brow creased with the lines of his thought. If it were a simple thing to go and take it from him in the hayhold, we would not be cowering here in Naglemund.
We shall worry about sorrow last, Prince, Yarnauga said. We must move now to secure the other 2. I am named for my eyes and my trained sight, but even I cannot see the future. Perhaps a ray will come for us to take sorrow from Elias, or perhaps he will make some mistake. No, it is Thorn and Miniar we must now find.
Joshua leaned back in his chair, crossing one ankle over the other. Joshua leaned back in his chair, crossing one ankle over the other and pressing his fingers on his lidded eyes.
This is like a children's story, he exclaimed. How are mere men to survive such times? Chill winter in Yuvan month, the risen Storm King who is a dead Scythy prince, and now a desperate search for long-forgotten swords. Madness, folly. He opened his eyes and sat up. But what can we do? I believe it all, so I must be mad too. The prince stood up and began to pace. The others watched him, grateful that despite the slenderness of their hope, they had at least convinced Joshua of the grim, strange truth. Father Strangyard, he said at last, would you go and find Dukas Grimner? I sent my pages and all the others away, so we would have privacy. Certainly, the archivist said, and hurried from the room, robes flapping on his lanky frame. No matter what happens, Joshua said, I will have much to explain at tonight's ride. I would have Isgrimner beside me. The barons know him as a practical man, where I am still somewhat suspect for my years in Naban and my odd ways. The prince smiled wearily. If these mad things are true, then our task is more complex than even it was. If the Duke of Elvrichala will stand behind me, then I think the barons will too, although I do not think I will share this latest bit of information, even if it does represent a thin shard of hope. I mistrust the ability of some of the lords to keep such amazing things a secret. The prince sighed. It was bad enough to have Elias alone for an enemy. He stood staring at the blazing hearth. His eyes glinted as if full of some reflecting moisture. My poor brother. Benebek looked up, startled by the prince's tone. My poor brother, Josua said again. He must be riding the nightmare now in earnest. The Storm King, the white foxes. I cannot think he knew what he was doing.
Somebody had knowledge of what they did, Prince, the troll declared. Stormspike's master and his minions do not, I am thinking, go dancing house to house like peddlers, a-selling of their wares.
Oh, I doubt not that Pyrates reached out to them somehow, Josua said. I know him and his unholy thirst for forbidden knowledge from the old days in the seminary of the Osirian brothers. He shook his head sorrowfully. But Elias, although brave as a bear, was always mistrustful of secrets in old books and scornful of scholarship. He also feared talk of spirits or the demonic. He became worse after his wife died. I wonder what he thought worth the terror he must reap for this bargain. I wonder if he now regrets it. What terrible allies. Poor, foolish Elias. It was raining again, and when Strangyard came back with the Duke, they were both soaked from their trip across the long courtyard. Isgrimner stood in the doorway of Josua's chambers, stamping like a nervous horse. I was just seeing to my wife, he explained. She and the other women left ahead of Skali's arrival and went to Thane Tonrud, her uncle. She has brought 6 of my men and a score of women and children. She's got the frostbite in her fingers, poor Gutrin. I am sorry to call you away from her, Isgrimner, especially if she's injured, the prince apologized, rising and clasping the old duke's hand. Oh, there's not much I can do. She has our girls to help her. He frowned, but there was pride in his voice. She's a strong woman. She made strong sons for me. And we shall bring help to Izorn, your eldest. Never fear. Josua led Isgrimner to the table and handed him Morgenes' manuscript. It may be, though, that we shall be fighting more than one battle. When the Duke had read The Weird of the Swords and asked some few questions, he read the pages again. This bit of rhyme, then? He asked at last. You think that's the key to the whole thing? If you mean the sort of key that locks a door, Yarnauga said, yes, we hope so. For that is what we must do, it seems, find the swords of Nisi's prophecy, swords that will keep the Storm King at bay. But your boy claimed Elias has the Scythy one. In fact, I saw him wearing an unfamiliar sword when he told me I could leave for Elvitsala. A great, strange-looking thing it was. This we know, Duke, Benedict chimed in. It is the other 2 we must first find. Isgrimner squinted suspiciously at the troll. And what do you want from me, little man? Only your help, in any way you can render it, Josua said, reaching out to pat the Rimmersman's shoulder. And Binabik of Yakanuk is here for the same reasons. Have you heard aught of the fate of Miniyar, Elvrit's sword? Yarnauga asked. I confess I should know, since it is the purpose of our league to gather such wisdom, but Miniyar has gone out of the tales we know. I know this from my grandmother, who was a storyteller, Isgrimner said, chewing his mustache as he remembered. It went through Elvrit's line to Fingil Redhand, and from Fingil to his son Yelden, and then, when Yelden fell from the tower, with Nissis dead on the floor behind him, Yelden's lieutenant Ikferdig took it, along with Fingil's crown of the Rimmersman and the mastery of the Hayhold. Ikferdig died in the Hayhold, Strangyard said shyly, warming his hands at the hearth. The Burned King, he is called in my books. Dead by the dragon fire of Red Shurakai, Yarnauga said, roasted in his throne room like a coney. So, Benedict said thoughtfully, while gentle Strangyard shivered at Yarnauga's words, Miniyar is either within the walls of the Hayholt somewhere, or it has been unmade by the red dragon's fiery breathing. Josua stood up and walked to the fireplace, where Hugh stood staring into the wavering flames. Strangyard inched away so as not to crowd his prince. Two confounding and unhappy alternatives, Josua said, and grimaced, turning to Father Strangyard. You have brought me no good news today, you wise men. At this the archivist looked morose. First you tell me our only hope is to find this trio of legendary blades, and now you say that 2 of them are in the stronghold of my enemy brother, if they exist at all. The prince sighed in dismay. What of the third? Does Priorides use it to cut beef at table? Thorn, Benedict said, climbing up to perch on the table's edge. The sword of the great knight who was Chimaris. Made from the star stone which destroyed the temple of Uvenis in Old Naban, Yarnauga said. But surely it went into the sea with great Chimaris when he was swept overboard in the Bay of Firanus. You see, spat Josua, 2 held by my brother, and the third in the even tighter grip of the jealous ocean. We are cursed before we begin. It no doubt would have also seemed an impossible chance that Morgenes' work would have survived the destruction of him and his chambers, Yarnauga said, and his voice was stern, and then would come safely through danger and despair to us here, so we could read Nisi's prophecy. But it did survive, and it did reach us. There is always hope. Excuse me, Prince, but there seems only one thing to do, Benedict said, nodding sagely atop the table. It is back to the archives and searching again until we find the answer to the riddle of Thorn and the other blades. And we must be finding it soon. Soon indeed, said Yarnauga, for we are wasting diamond precious time. By all means, said Josua, pulling his chair over by the hearth and slumping down into it. By all means make haste, but I deeply fear that our time has already run out. I'm going to read a few more pages, but yeah, there's one good stopping place coming up, so I'll read a few more pages. It will take us past the top of the hour, but I don't think that matters too much. Damn and damn and damn, Simon said, hurling yet one more rock from the battlement into the teeth of the wind. Nagleman seemed to stand in a great expanse of soapy gray nothingness, a mountain sprouting from a sea of swirling rain. Damn, he added as he bent to search for another on the wet stone wall. Sangfugal looked over, his fine cap a limp, sodden mass on his head. Simon, he said crossly, you cannot have it both ways. First you curse them all for dragging you along, behind them like a peddler's sack. Then you blaspheme and hurl stones because you are not invited to the afternoon's deliberations. I know, Simon said, sending another projectile down from the castle walls. I don't know what I want. I don't know anything. The harper scowled. What I would like to know is, what are we doing up here? Are there not better places to feel miserable and left out? It is cold as a well-digger's privy parts on these battlements. He allowed his teeth to chatter for a moment, hoping to inspire pity. Why are we up here? Because it clears a man's head. A little wind and rain, Towser called, making his way back along the battlement toward his 2 companions. There's no better cure for a night of drinking. The little old man winked at Simon, who guessed that Towser would have gone down long ago, but for the enjoyable sight of Sangfugal shivering in his beautiful gray velvet robe. Well, the harper growled, miserable as a soaked cat, you drink like a man in his youth, Towser, or in his second childhood. Thus I suppose it is no surprise to see you prance on the walls for fun, just like a rascally boy." "Ah, sang Fugel," Towser said with a wrinkly smile, watching another of Simon's missiles send up a gout of water from the rain-pocked pond that eddied where the commons yard had been. "You are too—" "Ho!" Towser pointed. "Is that not Duke Isgrimner? I had heard he was returned. Ho! Duke!" The jester shouted and waved at the stout figure Isgrimner squinting against the slanting waved as the stout figure Isgrimner squinted against the slanting raindrops, looking up. "Duke Isgrimner! That's Towser!"
"Is that who it is?" the Duke cried. "Damn me, it is! You old whoreson!"
Come up, Towser said. "Come and tell me, what is the news?" "I shouldn't be amazed," sang Fugel said sardonically as the Duke ankled across the submerged commons toward the curling staircase in the wall. "The only person besides an old madman who would come up of his free will would be a Rimmersman. It's probably even too warm for him, since it's not actually sleeting or snowing." Isgrimner had a tired smile and a nod for Simon and the harper, then turned and clasped the jester's veined hand and gave him a comradely smack on the shoulder. He was so much taller and bulkier than Towser that he looked like a mother bear cuffing her cub. While the Duke and the jester exchanged tidings, Simon threw stones and listened, and sang Fugel stood with a look of patient, hopeless suffering. Soon, unsurprisingly, the Rimmersman's talk came around from mutual friends and homely things to darker topics. As Isgrimner spoke of the gathering threat of war and the shadow in the north, Simon felt the cold that the chill winds had strangely helped dispel for a while, come shouldering back. When the Duke began to speak in hushed tones of the ruler of the north, then sheered off, saying some things were too fear-fraught to speak of openly, the cold seemed to slide further into Simon's being. He stared out into the murky distance, at the dark fist of storm that hovered beyond the rain on the northern horizon, and felt himself slipping back into his journey on the dream road. The naked thrust of the stone mountain, its halo of indigo and yellow flames, the silver-masked queen in her icy throne, and the chanting voices in the rocky fastness. Black thoughts pressed down on him, crushing him, like the rim of a broad wheel. It would be so easy, he was sure, to go forward into the darkness, into the warmth beyond the storm's chill. It's so close, so close. "Simon!" a voice said in his ear. A hand grasped his elbow. He looked down, startled to see the edge of the battlement inches from his foot, and the wind-lashed water of the courtyard directly below. "What are you doing?" sang Fugel asked, giving his arm a shake. "If you went over this little wall, you would have more than broken bones." I was, Simon said, feeling a dark mist still clouding his thoughts, a mist that was slow to clear. "Thorn," Towser said loudly, responding to something Isgrimner had said. Simon turned to see the little jester tugging at the Rimmersman's cloak like an importunate child. "Thorn, did you say? Well then, why did you not come to me immediately? Why not come to old Towser? I know all there is to know, if anybody does." The old man turned to Simon and the harper. "Why, who was with our John longer than anyone? Who? I was, of course. Choked and tumbled and played for him 60 years. And the great Chimerist, too. I saw him come to the court." He turned back around to face the Duke, and there was a light in his eyes that Simon had not seen before. "I am the man you want," Towser said proudly. "Quick, take me to Prince Joshua." The bandy-legged old jester almost seemed to dance, so light were his steps, as he led the somewhat dumbfounded Rimmersman toward the stairs. "Thank God and his angels," said sang Fugel, watching them go. "I suggest we go immediately to pour something inside us, a wetness within, to make up for the wetness without." He led Simon, who was still shaking his head, down from the rainy battlements into the echoing torchlit stairwell, out of the northern winds for a little while, and into the warmth.
And that's where we're stopping, because that's actually the ending of something for a change, instead of stopping in the middle of a paragraph. Anyway, what is Kristen asked what the shirt says. So before I disappear, England's new music sensation sweeping across America, the Beatles. One of my many Beatles t-shirts, because long time ago, when my kids started picking out presents for me, they realized that basically they could get me rock and roll t-shirts, and I would usually wear them. Actually, I don't think they've ever given me a rock and roll or a superhero shirt that I haven't enjoyed and haven't worn. So that's why you will oftentimes see me with either superhero shirts or, because it became the go-to. It's like, can't think of anything to get Dad. Let's get Dad a Beatles t-shirt, The Who t-shirt, an Elvis Costello t-shirt, a Talking Heads t-shirt, a Radiohead t-shirt. So a Gorillaz t-shirt, all of which I've worn in the last couple of weeks. Anyway, with that, I say thank you so much for joining me. It's been a real pleasure, as always, to spend some time with you. I will be back, as far as I know, next week. Same time, same channel, same everything. Again, the reason I hedge my bets a little bit on some of this stuff is because I never know what the schedule is with my dad, because it changes from week to week. So assuming that everything will be normal, I will see you guys all at 1 a.m. Sunday or 7 p.m. Sunday, or both, if you are gluttons for punishment. Until that time, take good care of yourselves, take good care of your loved ones, take good care of the folks around you, and everything will eventually take care of itself. So I am told, and so I believe. So peace, have a good week, and I'll talk to you soon. Ciao.